Hey there. I'm excited to announce this to you today. This is what you've been waiting for in your spiritual quest. This is something I've wanted to do for a long time, and I'm finally ready to announce it that it's ready to go. It's the Grief to Growth Community Circle. Now, this is a sanctuary where like-minded souls are united in their journey through grief and towards personal transformation. It's more than just a place. It's a beginning. It's a commitment to growth and understanding. Here you're finding not just a community, but you're entering a circle of trust and depth. You're going to engage with interactive coursework. You'll dive into exclusive podcast episodes and partake in discussions that illuminate the path from mourning to empowerment. This is a realm where every question is honored and every individual's journey is validated. To be part of this exclusive circle, visit us at grieftogrowth.com/community or look for the chat icon at the bottom of every page on the main website. Remember that entry is a privilege because I want to ensure that every member is as dedicated and genuine as you are. You must apply to join, but the journey within is worth every step. So go ahead and join us today. Check it out, grieftogrowth.com/community, and I look forward to seeing you there.
Hi there. Welcome to Grief to Growth podcast. Your host is Brian Smith, spiritual seeker, best-selling author, grief survivor, and life coach. Brian believes that the worst tragedies of life provide the greatest opportunity for growth. Brian says he was planted, not buried, and he is here to help you grow where you've been planted by the difficulties in life. In each episode, Brian and his guests will share what has helped them to survive and thrive. It is his sincere hope this episode helps you today.
Hey, everybody, this is Brian Smith back with another episode of Grief to Growth. And today I've got with me a near-death experiencer. His name is Chris Kito. I'm going to read Chris's bio, which is very short, and then we're just going to have a conversation about his experience and what he's learned since then. Chris is he's got a BS degree. He's experienced an NDE at the age of 24 or 22, Chris, because I got two different numbers.
I was 24.
You're 24. At the age of 24, it was due to an allergic reaction, food allergy. And Chris is going to talk about the changes that he found necessary in order to integrate his NDE. This NDE happened in April of 2012. He went into anaphylactic shock due to a peanut allergy that led to his near-death experience. Chris was young at the time and just starting a career. And he feels that a transformation took place after his NDE, changing what had been his previous youthful outlook on life and mindset as Chris was entering a new career. So that NDE created challenges and opportunities, which Chris credits to his newfound spirituality and his extraordinarily life journey of feeling and purpose. So, Chris, welcome to Grief to Growth. It's good to have you here.
Well, thank you for having me, Brian. I'm excited to be here. I've heard a lot of great things and glad we could connect on this Monday morning.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing this. I know you're still in some pain. You had an injury and you're soldiering through, so I appreciate you sitting down and doing this with me.
Yeah, well, you hit the age of 32 and you sleep wrong on your shoulder and you're out of commission for 2 weeks. So,
Yeah, give it another 20 years and it gets worse.
I won't even be able to get out of bed. Us millennials are a little fragile.
Yeah, that's the thing about living in these bodies, man. They're fragile.
Exactly.
So tell me about your, start wherever you'd like to start with your story. If you want to give us some background, or if you want to start with the night that you had the NDE, wherever you'd like to jump off.
Sure, absolutely. Well, it's been about 8 years. And a little background, this is the experience what happened. I did not speak about it or really discuss my near-death experience or any of the after effects or any of that story for about I would say almost 6.5, 7 years. It never came out. But now after, really processing it and having about an 8-year journey with it, I'm more and more comfortable, almost it seems monthly and every year actually discussing what happened fully. And for myself, also just understanding the integration and what exactly happened because for a very long time, I had no idea what really went on. And it was a kind of trial by error and just every day and understanding and over the years, really putting the pieces back together. So I grew up in Long Island, New York. I went to school in Connecticut and I studied business. And many of my friends and all of my family stayed in the Northeast, and it never really resonated with me to be working in Manhattan and doing that grind of commuting. And I ended up deciding the summer after I graduated to move to Los Angeles. Originally wanted to have some sort of business career within entertainment, maybe along the lines of like an agent or something on the business side. That was my degree and my interest at the time. So I moved to LA, went out there with that. And within 6 months, I was, going on interviews. I was meeting people. I was getting involved in a lot of local organizations and groups. And a friend of mine, within about 6 months of me moving out there, I was out there in October. So by April, had a birthday party at a hotel. And, very clearly in a key, detail, and so many, I always say devil or God's in the details of any story. And her birthday party was on a Sunday night, which is kind of an odd night to have a birthday party, right before a work day.
Yeah.
Which would prove to be very important. Little did I know at that moment or any other time in my story and the arc of what eventually happens. So went to the birthday party, was having a great time. It was a Sunday night. Low key, it was at the lobby of a restaurant, and they served cake and all of that. And just to backpedal a little bit, I was born with a peanut allergy. I've been allergic to peanuts and nuts, all tree nuts and legumes for my whole life. Never had any severe reactions or any need to ever take an injection of epinephrine, which would be the common EpiPen. Yeah. I would just avoid them. I was cautious. I was definitely very, very careless in the sense of EpiPens having to be replaced every 14 to 16 months. And I just wouldn't replace them. And maybe be 2 years I'd check the expiration label and I didn't care. And, I'd have some Benadryl with me, or it was always in the medicine cabinet, but I avoided it. People knew I had a peanut or nut allergy. Mm-hmm. Wasn't something that was really discussed. I would just avoid it. And I wasn't that respectful of the allergy because I never had anything severe. And I was very fortunate. I just was able to avoid it very simply. And it was not something that came into my world. But I did have EpiPens with me. But they weren't always, at points, they were more than half the time either expired or maybe not in the full capacity of how they should be working with that. So you then fast forward years later, I kind of developed more of a cavalier attitude towards it. Not that it wasn't super cavalier, but again, I was going around with at times expired epinephrine, which would have been a life-saving medicine for me. Mm-hmm. So we're at the birthday party. Everyone's around. They start cutting up cake, and I get a piece of cake, and I just take like a little bit of it. I mean, it was like a half the size of a fork. I put it in my mouth, and instantly I could tell there was peanuts or something in it. And my first thought was, oh, geez, what is this? And I end up swallowing. I didn't know it was peanuts. I really don't know what peanuts taste like, if that sounds odd to say, but I've never actually ate them. I know what the smell is. Mm-hmm. I kind of can figure, okay, this is the smell, this is what it is, but I really didn't know. And then I thought to myself, who would ever have a peanut butter cake? Does this cake really have peanuts in it? Yeah. That was so odd to me. I've never come across like a peanut cake or a peanut butter cake. And it happened instantly within the fraction of a second. Because you're thinking, you're talking, you're in a group of people, and you boom in. You just take it and you go, whoa. And I didn't want to spit anything. I didn't think to spit anything. I thought, oh my God, maybe this was just a trace of it, and I'm not going to have a reaction, and I'll be okay. And then I immediately just thought, oh my God, like what happened? It happened so quick. It was just an unconscious, you're just eating. You weren't expecting it because it was a chocolate cake. Yeah. It looked chocolate. It was the frosting. It was that. And the next thing I know, I swallowed something with peanut. I thought, okay, all right. And there I thought, okay, let me just get something to kind of wash it down. My mouth's a little itchy. So I get like a little Sprite. I wash it down. I'm like, all right, I'm fine. Let me just, go home later tonight. It's around 11 o'clock on a Sunday right now. And I'll just take 2-3 Benadryl. I'll sleep this off and, we'll get on with Monday morning. Right. No big deal. So I go home, I do just that. And then, it's like a half hour later and I'm laying in bed and, I'm like, all right, how is it? Is the reaction going down? And at these moments I can kind of be like, I'm like self-checking my breathing and my feelings. I'm like, I still don't feel well. Now my stomach hurts. Now, like, I'm still kind of red. I'm getting warm. Is it because the blanket's wrong? Was the air conditioner not on? What's going on? And then you start to race in your head. All right, is this going to get better? Is this not going to get better? And that's when things start to change over from, all right, maybe I may not just sleep this off with 3 Benadryl, and this could be something more. So here I am laying here like midnight, 12:30, 11, like right around that time in bed. And I'm like, all right, it's getting a little harder to breathe. I can tell it's kind of getting like a kind of like that, like a little heavier. Not that I couldn't get the air in, but it was heavier. So I thought, all right, let me maybe take another Benadryl. Let me just go look at myself in the mirror and see if my eyes are bloodshot. So then I wake up, I get out of bed. I wasn't really sleeping. And I go into the bathroom, I flip the light on, and I'm red. My face is red, my body's red, my arms are red, my armpits, my chest, my neck, everything is red. I'm starting to break out. Hives are head to toe right now. I go, okay, this isn't good. Then I remember thinking, all right, let's just start breathing in front of the mirror and see what happens. I'm like, maybe you're just going to settle down, take another Benadryl. So I think I took another Benadryl. Mm-hmm. So now I've had like 4 little pink tablets that don't seem to really be doing anything at this moment. Then I thought, all right, well, let's take a step ahead here. And I got to see what I'm going to do here because this may not stop. And I've never had a reaction before that I can remember where I knew what was going to happen. I was kind of making up like, all right, does this stop? Does this go? Does it get worse? Is my breathing going to stop? I don't know. I've never gone into anaphylaxis. I've fortunately never had an experience like that. So it was uncharted. I didn't know what decisions to make or I didn't know timelines or what was really happening. Yeah. Like I didn't know now, like, there's phases of the anaphylactic reaction that I didn't know. I was just like, all right, I'm covered in hives and I'm uncomfortable. Now I know within a very short period of time, things then escalate very quickly. Mm. So I'm sitting here breathing. I said, all right, let me look for my EpiPens. Let me see what I can do. Maybe I'll just inject myself with this. And I go grab the EpiPen, and shocking, it was expired by about 6 months. So a side note on that, EpiPens and epinephrine may or may not ever work. There's no guarantee. Even if it was a brand new EpiPen, there's no guarantee it'll ever work. And a lot of times it has to be administered before you're in a full-blown anaphylaxis to stop it. Mm-hmm. And that's why they always give you packs of 2 because one many times does not work. Mm-hmm. So there's no guarantee with that. And that was kind of running through my head. And I thought, well, this is expired. And then I thought, all right, I may have to call an ambulance. And I said, well, is the ambulance going to get here in time? Is the ambulance going to have epinephrine? I mean, I don't know what they do or don't carry. How long are they going to take to get here? It's Los Angeles. It's Sunday night, but I don't know. It's LA. They might just not pay attention or, what do I do in this situation? I'm starting to run through scenarios in my head while my breathing is becoming more and more labeled. It's more and more labored. And I'm thinking, well, all right, I can take the epinephrine, but then once you take the epinephrine, you can't really move. That's one thing I knew. Like you can't do stuff. You can't take it and then just go about your normal actions because of the adrenaline going through you and you just can't really function. So I thought, well, if I do this, I can't go anywhere. And I don't know if it's going to work. And I thought, well, I can call an ambulance or I thought I could just drive to the hospital because it's Sunday night and there's no one on the road and I can just zip there if I want. And I'll go and I'll just take the EpiPen with me. I'll get as far as I can, and then I can just, white knuckle it till I get to the hospital. So I'm like, all right, I need to do something here. Something needs to happen. And my thought was, all right, I'm going to just drive myself to the hospital. That was it. I don't think I wanted to call an ambulance. I thought that wouldn't make sense because for some reason I thought they wouldn't be able to help me. So I got in the car, I grabbed the EpiPen, and I put it on the passenger seat and I just started zipping down the road in Los Angeles. I was living in West LA at the time and I went to Cedars-Sinai Hospital and I'm driving and it's Sunday night, thank God late. There's no one on the road. And I just remember thinking how much time I have, and I'm watching the GPS and I'm breathing, and I'm like, just focus on breathing. And I'm like, and it's harder and harder to breathe and less oxygen's getting into me. And I'm thinking, all right, I don't know how much time I have. I'm red. Everything hurts. I'm now running on like adrenaline. I'm like, this is getting close to the wire. I had the EpiPen. I had it out of the cartridge. I'm like, I'm going to get as far as I can. And if I have to, I'm going to inject it. And then I'm just going to, hope I can get to the hospital. So I end up getting to the hospital. I pull in and they take my car. And a lot of this is very fuzzy. Must have, because I just got out and then I kind of stumbled into the emergency room, and I walk up to the nurse at the desk, and she looks at me and just kind of like stares at me, and I go, I'm having an allergic reaction. I need help. And I pulled out and she goes, I need your ID. And I pulled out my wallet. It was in my pocket, to give her my ID and said, here it is. And I couldn't physically with my arms get my ID out of the little slot. I was so off. And I then started to like kind of fall into the table. And then really at that moment, all I remember is that her and another nurse coming around and grabbing me, and they carried me back and like kind of held me up to the back room and put me on a bed. And at that point, I was really out of it. I had, and this is when I'm in the hospital, and I had about 7 doctors, nurses, physicians, assistants working around me, and they pulled my shirt off, and I was covered head to toe in just red welts and hives, and my breathing was minimal, and they're, holding my mouth open, and they're talking to me, and they're trying to see what happened, and they're sticking needles in my arm, and, they're putting Benadryl shots in my wrist. They're putting me on oxygen to get me to breathe. They're rating my oxygen levels, which were at that point, which a lot of this I found out later was about 10% was my oxygen consumption. Wow. So I wasn't taking in any oxygen at that time. And I was really kind of just fading. I at that point, I remember just kind of thinking, like, with everyone working around me, I'm like, why are they rushing around so much? Like, what's going on? And they're all moving, and they're so panicked, and they're like moving me in this and they're that, and they're looking at me, and they're frantic. I've never seen, it really was just like the TV shows you'd see on ER with everyone frantically moving, and then to like be laying there and just kind of watching this show unfold around you. And I didn't feel anything at this time. And then I started to pass away, and I went into this extreme, and a lot of the NDE, I'm sure you've spoken to NDE experiencers, there's no language we have to really describe a lot of an experience. So it's very hard. So I'm going to do my best I can to describe the sensations, feelings, and really what was going on consciously around me. Mm-hmm. And I went into this euphoric state of being that I can't even, you couldn't attain any way in this dimension, this physical space. And it was just this beautiful euphoric feeling of laying there. And I remember consciously like these waves of thoughts and ideas coming to me that I was like, oh yeah. I remember very clearly like moments of this of, oh, I'm dying. That's it. And I was like, I'm dying. Like, that is it. This is death. I've been here. Like, this is it. I am dying. I am leaving this physical space, this body. Like, I'm it. That's it. I knew I was done. Like, I'm not breathing. The epinephrine, which they were injecting into my shoulder, into my neck, was not working. And they were panicking. And then I remember them doing that. And I remember the doctor like holding my eyes open and my mouth and saying, Chris, have you ever had a tube down your throat? We're going to put a tube down your throat. And I so clearly, so much of this was a haze, but then there were so many moments that were so vivid. It's like it happened 5 minutes ago. I remember the doctor looking at me and him saying, he goes, I'm so sorry. I can't save your life.
Wow.
And I didn't have any response to that. He just said it to me. And I just looked at him and I didn't say anything. And then he said, I'm just sorry. I can't save your life. And it's not, they weren't able to stop or get me to breathe or stop the anaphylaxis. And with anaphylaxis, if it's too far, that's it. It's too far. Because nothing was working. The oxygen wasn't getting pulled in. They couldn't, they're going to try and put a tube down my throat. The epinephrine, the Benadryl, it wasn't stopping anything.
Yeah.
And when that happened, I remember I've always grew up in a very spiritual, and both my grandfathers, more so now I know, are two of my main spirit guides, and I remember them being there and saying, "All right, take it easy." And I was laying there, and I had the lights and the commotion, and again, it was the most euphoric feeling. There was zero pain, zero physical sensation. Like I'm suffering.
Let me just ask you: you're still in your body at this point, right? So you're still in your body, but you're feeling this euphoria. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I was still, I would say I was in my body. I wasn't out of my body looking into it, but I didn't feel anything. It was this euphoric feeling that's undescribable.
Okay.
Laying there. And I liken the scene around me to, if you ever saw the movie Saving Private Ryan, when they're landing on the beach and there's the explosion and chaos going around, but there's no noise. And Tom Hanks is just looking around. That's what it was like. So I was just there and I didn't feel anything. I didn't sense anything in this physical world. I was somewhere else. And I was just in this euphoric being, realizing and understanding that I was dying and with spirit. And I just thought to myself, I was like, none of these material things really matter. Like, who cares about an iPhone? It's funny, I took an iPhone and I just kind of had these thoughts wash over. And I was like, none of this anger matters. And I guess it's just love and peace. And that's all. Nothing else matters at the end. Here I am, now I look at it and say, you're dying alone and suffocating to death on a hospital bed. Those material things don't really have no meaning, and nor do any negative or hurtful emotions. Life gets very, very clear when you're suffocating to death. So I then had those passing feelings run through me of those messages, and then I was with my grandfathers, and I remember them very clearly saying, you can't die. Like, it's not. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, that's it. I'm dead. I'm dying. I'm dead. I'm dying. And then very clearly being like, nope, you can't die. It's not time. You have work to do. That's it. You have work to do. Can't die. And I thought, okay, in myself, all right. And then I remember there was no fighting up until that point. It was just kind of a passing through. And then when they said, you can't die, you have work to do, you need to fix relationships, you have to do things. And there was no more. It's just fix relationships. You have work to do. It's very clear, very direct. And there was no misunderstanding. It was just there. And it was a wash through me conscious message. And then I thought, okay. And then I remember thinking, I don't want to die. I can't die. And I remember starting to then, in any way I could, fight to start breathing again. And I remember just coming back. And it was like that in that movie, Saving Private Ryan, on the beach, when they cut the music again, and it comes back. It's the bombs, explosions, and chaos. And that's what I came back to. I came back to like that. I was like, and I started breathing, and they're like, oh, he's moving. And I immediately just came back in and felt pain and everything, and I was back. And I was gasping, and I started talking. I said, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I need to breathe. And they're like, you're breathing. Everything's coming in. And I came back, and my body was responding, and I was under this immense and intense pain, grasping and scraping and fighting for oxygen. And that's what I I went back into. I knew I was back when I felt everything.
Okay.
And I had so much epinephrine running through me. They were holding my legs down because I was shaking so much. And I was breathing and kind of clawing, and they were holding me, and I started to breathe. And then, time later, I started to calm down more physically, and I was breathing. And then I was back, and I started to stabilize. And then I found out later I was there for about 6.5 hours, but I only felt I was there for about 15 minutes. And that was the physical situation with the near-death experience. And when I left, the woman goes, I go, how? I said, she goes, oh my God. She goes, you're unrecognizable from when you walked in. One of the main nurses, she said, when you walked in, you were, out of a 1 to 10, you were a 9.5. We didn't think you were going to survive. And now you're like, you can leave. And they're like, well, you can leave. They're like, we can't do anything. You're breathing. The reaction stopped. You're okay. Just walk out of here slowly. They gave me like the little sock with like the rubber on the bottom.
Yeah.
And they're like, you're unrecognizable. They're like, you want to go home and sleep in your own bed? I go, okay. So I had no idea what was going on. I'm like, and none of this, all this story had, I didn't really realize it at the moment. I'm still just coming down from the experience.
Right.
It was being pieced together days and weeks later. And I said, all right, I'll leave. So I kind of got my stuff. I walked out with like a little bag and a doctor's note and my blue socks with the rubber bottoms. And, I went and, I always say as a joke, I said, I really knew I was back when I then left, and I had to pay like $18 for parking.
It's LA, right?
So I said, well, welcome back to the world. So I paid for parking.
Yeah.
And then I drove home at 5 a.m. in the morning, and I just slept. And for the next few days, I was in unbelievable pain. My body was cramping, aching, hurting to breathe. I just remember laying there. Breathing was so hard because everything just hurt. My body was jacked up of every possible chemical you can imagine. That was just the physical. Then within a few days, once all the medicine wore off, I then started to think like, oh my God, what actually happened? I then the mental and emotional aspect, once the immense pain and physical shock wore off, I was like, oh my gosh, what happened?
So, Chris, let me ask you about your experience, because I know it's hard to put into words, and I have interviewed you several ND years, and they're like it's kind of hard to describe. But did you physically see your grandfathers? Did you ever go to another place? What was that like?
I didn't physically see them. I don't physically see them in the sense I get images of what I know they would look like. I don't think I went to another place physically. Well. That's all. I don't have the language to describe it. I knew I wasn't on this physical realm where I was conscious. And I can't say I was somewhere where there were, rainbows and rivers, but I was not here. Okay. That was it. And that was a conscious state of being. I was gone.
So it was a feeling or a knowing that you were somewhere else.
It was a conscious knowing that I was not here, that I was dead. I was in the process of dying, and I was surrounded by spirit. And I got my messages, and I got kicked out.
Yeah. So your messages were you had work to do, right? Is that what the message was? Okay.
And I got kicked back. So, a few days later, once all the pain and physical, reactions stopped, fortunately, I've always kept a journal since I was like 13, 14 years old. And I was journaling, and I remember, and I've gone back years later, and I looked at some of my journals within a few days or weeks or after the NDE, and I clearly wrote, I've had a change in consciousness. Like I am literally a different person. I'm a different makeup, mentally, physically, emotionally, consciously. And in the weeks and days and months and years after, I always say, in my opinion, and I could be totally right or wrong, the NDE is like 1% of what actually happens. The 99% the NDE is the mechanism. What really comes out is, well, what's the integration? What's the change? What's the after effect on yourself, your community, from that incident? I mean, the NDE was really intense for, getting the most timelines later. It was about 15 minutes and then an eight-hour ordeal in total. And now we're sitting here 8 years later, and we spent 8 hours on the incident and 8 years on the integration, the understanding, the development, and moving through that process. It takes 10, 15 years or a lifetime to fully integrate and understand a near-death experience and go from there. So it's a very small spot. It's just like that initial, it happened, and then it's not over. You've got a lifetime to go. Yeah. And there's its own set of challenges with having a near-death experience and integrating and really a process of healing and understanding, and so many levels to it.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey there, something I want to tell you about today. My podcast platform, Buzzsprout, has recently made it easier for me to allow you to support me financially. Go to www.grieftogrowth.com/subscribe. That's grief2growth.com/subscribe. And once you're there, you can sign up to support me financially. Now, you can do it for as little as $3 a month, or of course, as much as you'd like. If you do that, you'll get access to bonus episodes, and you'll see those in the regular feed. They'll have a lock on them. But when you become a subscriber, you'll actually get access to your own private feed, and you'll be able to listen to the regular podcast along with the bonus podcast for the subscribers. I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank you for sharing the podcast. And I want to thank those of you who support me financially. Have a great day, and on to the episode.
We'll get back to Grief to Growth in just a few seconds. Did you know that Brian is an author and a life coach? If you're grieving or know someone who is grieving, his book, Grief to Growth, is a best-selling, easy-to-read book that might help you or someone you know. People work with Brian as a life coach to break through barriers and live their best lives. You can find out more about Brian and what he offers at www.grieftogrowth.com, www.grief2growth.com, or text growth, GROWTH, to 31996. If you'd like to support this podcast, visit www.patreon.com/grieftogrowth, www.patreon.com/GRIEF2GROWTH to make a financial contribution. And now back to Grief to Growth.
And I'm sorry.
Let's talk about that, because you bring up a really important point. And I have spoke with a lot of NDEers and studied NDEs. I've interviewed PMH Atwater, and one of the things a lot of people don't realize is, because a lot of people say, "I'd love to have an NDE." You're so lucky you got to have that, but there's a lot of challenges that come along with it. And so, what were your thoughts before you had your NDE, and explain to me how you felt coming out of that experience?
Yeah, I don't think anyone wants a near-death experience. I think they just want to find a path to spirituality or enlightenment or an understanding, or find peace or healing. I don't think anyone wants to purposely die or.
Yeah, we think we want it, but we don't really want it.
Yeah, it's like everyone wants to be in great shape, and look great naked, but no one wants to do the work in the gym. That's it. That's kind of like an NDE. Yeah. And there are other ways to reach enlightenment and peace and healing and all of that. But you don't want to. I don't wish an NDE on any human being in the world. Mm-hmm. Because it doesn't always work out well. I am so fortunate I'm alive. By all accounts, I should be dead, mm-hmm. or severely brain dead. Yeah. So it's an absolute miracle I walked out of there. Absolute, like in that sense. I'm sorry, but what was the question?
I was saying, so you come back from this, and like I said, explain to me what the challenges are. I've talked to some people that have explained some, but explain to our audience, what are the challenges?
So I remember coming back, and, I'm 24 at the time, and, you're entering adulthood and building your life. And, fortunately I can look back now over 8 years and look at journals, because, nothing changes more than your past and what your relationship is with emotion and understanding. You say, well, I thought this, or I thought that, or I had that feeling. And then you can actually look back and say, oh, wow, on May 15th in 2012, 2 weeks after, this is really what I thought and felt, because I wrote it. So I can go back and see exactly what I was feeling and going back, but there were so many challenges, everything from, I remember, I'll stop from the top down for the first 6 months. Well, really for the first few months, I had no idea what happened. I didn't know the term NDE. I didn't know any of this. I just had this full blown experience, and pieces were coming back over days, weeks, and months over this time. For the first 6 months, I remember writing, and every day I would wake up and I would think to myself, and I would feel I had no idea who I was. In the sense, and that's a very hard, to put into words. I would wake up and I would not know my emotional response to situations. I would not know how I thought, because of what I would have done or how I would have felt was different from after that NDE. And I didn't realize what was happening. I just woke up and I just thought, oh my God, I don't know what I'm thinking. I don't know my own emotions. I remember walking and smelling roses one day and just breaking down crying and having no explanation for that. I didn't have a sense of smell. I always had a very bad sense of smell. Now I came back from my NDE and I can smell flowers. I remember my vision reset a little bit. I remember being able to see clearer. I remember, the physical attributes where I stopped eating meat for 6 months. I couldn't be in the sun. I had to wear a hat and sunglasses every day. And I was away from big lights where I didn't have any loud music. So I had these physical changes that I was just like, oh no, I can't do that. Or I was going to go do something. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to eat that. And, really 4 or 5 days ago or a week ago, I functioned differently in the world. Now my functioning is totally different. And my thought process and my emotions. And every day I woke up and I remember thinking and writing, I have no idea what's going on. Like I had no clue. And it's the weirdest feeling now looking back on it, because now it's been, more integration, and 8 years later, we've worked with it and figured a lot of this out. And I knew what was going on at that point. I never heard the term near-death experience. I didn't know what anything was. I just woke up and was like, I have no idea what's going on. In any aspect, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I was just this lost puppy, just kind of like along for this weird ride. With no language or no direction. I didn't know what any of this was, so I couldn't even ground it down and say, okay, this is happening. It was just, I have no idea what's going on.
Wow.
And that continued for 6 months pretty strong. And then somehow, and I don't know, this was just by the grace of the universe, I was online Googling like after effects. I'm trying, I have to figure out what happened. There's got to be something. I said, someone else has had to have something like this happen. And I started looking around and I came across IANS, and it had a list of, after effects of an NDE, like 35. And I had like 33 out of the 35. I was like, all right, well, that's a pretty good indicator. So I called them. I said, hey, I live in Los Angeles, and I took your little test, and I had 33 out of the 35. Is there anyone you can connect me to speak to? I need to talk to someone. And they said, yeah, we have this woman up in Santa Barbara. Give her a call. Here's her number. So I called this woman, and we spoke, and she goes, oh, honey, within 2 minutes, she goes, oh, honey, you had a near-death experience. I go, what? Yeah. And she goes, yeah. And she's like, listen, I have a group meeting. Why don't you come up next week? We'll talk. And that's really what started the process of understanding what happened, and the heavy work in every aspect of my life of integration and accepting and evolving into who I became instantly. And it was an instant flash with the NDE, but then the journey is decades and a lifetime of fully integrating and understanding and developing that consciousness of what you grew into. And that's how I found IANS and how I found the near-death experiencer community. And I started to then piece together everything that happened. And I said, well, this happened. Oh, well, yeah, that's that and this. And then I said, well, what else is kind of trickling out? And it was like things were getting worked out over days, weeks, months, even years. Even at the 7-year mark of my NDE, which was last summer, it was like the other shoe drop of me changing my life and everything. And, looking at the process, saying, okay, this is a 15-year process, or this is a 30-year or a lifetime process, and understanding that, because there's always something that kind of comes up more. I never spoke about this for 6.5 years. I never talked about my near-death experience. I mean, people that knew me, I just said, yeah, Chris had a peanut reaction, and that was it. There was nothing more to it. And if I ever did speak about it, I probably only spoke about 75% of the story, and it was very filtered and edited down. Now I speak pretty freely about it. I disclose everything. There's 100% disclosure with my story, but up until a year ago, you were getting the 75% version.
Yeah, I think that seems to be a common thing that people have the NDE. There is this process of reintegrating back into the world, feeling maybe out of place, out of sorts. What the sensitivity. So I'm glad you took the time to explain that to people that may not really understand all that's involved with it. It's not just that 15 minutes or whatever that you were on the other side. It's coming back and just being like a fish out of water, I guess.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hi there. I'm really excited to tell you about my latest ebook. It's 4 lessons that you can learn from the near-death experience without going through all the trouble of dying to learn them. I've been studying NDEs for several years now. I am completely convinced that not only are they 100% real, but that there's some very universal wisdom that we can get from the near-death experience. And I've distilled that down in this book into 4 short lessons. And I've also given you all the reasons why I believe that NDEs are absolutely real. So go to www.grieftogrowth.com/NDE lessons to pick it up for free. www.grieftogrowth.com/NDE lessons. I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I still feel like a fish out of water 8 years later.
Do you really? Yeah.
So I think any NDE or anyone that's had a severe experience or a spiritually transformative experience has the forever you're changed. And the key word is integrating. The experience will never leave you, and it always is constantly evolving. And, we have to live in this world and function and do the best we can for ourselves and family and community. But there's always going to be a rift in like the paper of life, because you have had that experience, and there's many ways to look at it. And a lot of, and I've taken the path of, okay, I understand that, I'm going to think, operate, and function very differently than some people. There's going to be people that agree with me. They don't agree with me, and I don't impose anything on anyone. I could be right. I could be totally wrong. That's none of there's no judgment. It's none of my business what other people think or what other people, and you kind of find your tribe of people that are in that same NDE world. That's why it's such a beautiful niche community.
Yeah.
Because we all kind of have this understanding of anyone that's gone through something, or grief, or a big transformative experience that, it changes your life forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your interaction with people, really, just moments of just having to really, to be, it's hard to put words to it, but to be in a situation where you just don't know how to respond, or you don't understand, and knowing that, okay, a year ago or 6 months ago, this is how I would have handled it or done it. Now you're like, I don't know. Like, you're learning to rethink. You're learning to reuse your brain. You're learning to reuse your mind or emotions and your understanding of what's going on. And all of that shifts. It's like everything you've been everything you believed, thought, learned was just thrown out the window and say, we're going to start this over a different way. And you're just like, okay, all right. I can't even go back to that. No, it's gone. Like, you just don't think like that anymore. And like, you can't, it's hard to explain, because you have to kind of be in that position to understand how to like really just turn over your life. And it wasn't like a process of, we're going to spend 20 years of meditating and then you're slowly going to gradually. It's like, no, just like that, NDE, everything's turned over, figure it out. because it's so severe and so intense so quickly, it just blows it's like a hurricane ripping a roof off a house. That's what it's really like. And then you got to kind of put the shingles back on one by one, but the roof looks completely different. The house is rebuilt. So I'm rebuilding my house and my everything. And that process still goes on. 8 years later, I still deal with that. And then you also have the little other things. You know, I remember, you know, I've always, you know, from that, you know, the you know, something so simple as the candy that's on the checkout aisle when you go at a grocery store, one peanut M&M will kill me in a half hour. You know, I can't touch food on an airplane. I have to be super careful. There were moments where I remember after my NDE, a year later, I remember just sitting there and I cooked pasta and I was like, there's peanuts in this pasta. And I took the pasta, I threw it all out and I wouldn't touch it. And I'm like, well, there's like not really any peanuts in spaghetti. I don't know why. I just thought there was. And so there was moments I had that were challenging to really trust food. And even now I only eat, anyone that knows me knows I only eat at a few restaurants. There's select restaurants. I won't go near them. I won't touch anything new. I don't eat anything that I don't prepare myself. I go to a barbecue and someone has cookies, this, that cake. I don't touch it. Like, it's just no. And anyone that knows me knows they didn't bother asking because they know the deal. So I had to adjust my life physically from my allergies significantly. All my EpiPens are up to date. I carry Benadryl on my wall. We don't need to make the same mistake twice. So there was that. There was a lot of little things that came up. So there was a bit of a reintegration and understanding with food. Something that people eat and snack and is healthy can kill me. And I'm surrounded by that all the time. And, you know, someone close to me once said, you know, they had a very severe allergy to tomatoes and they would, whenever they went to the grocery store, they'd put a tomato in their basket to kind of understand it and like to develop less of a fear and an understanding. And so when I go to grocery stores, sometimes I'll put peanuts, walnuts, or something that's safely contained in my basket just to have it with me and say, I said, listen, I remember talking to Peanut and I said, listen, I'll respect you if you respect me. And this is how we're going to be. I come in peace. And I would walk around Whole Foods with nuts in my basket. That's it. And that really helped a lot. And I said, I'm not going to have this adversary relationship with food that is going to kill me all the time. And that was a big issue. I mean, I don't, you know, I've never met anyone that reads labels as much as I do and as many times as I do. I'll read it 5 times and scan it and look to make sure, you know, no nuts, no nuts, no nuts. And I got to check, is it, you know, facility that had that. So there are so many effects that come out of it. And, it's been quite the process. It's been a blessing. The journey's been an absolute blessing. I've met amazing people and I you know, now I find it very healing for myself to be speaking about this. And that's really been very transformative because for 6 years, I wouldn't talk about it. It just didn't come up. It was like, no, we just don't talk about it. I wasn't ready. I didn't feel it. And then all of a sudden I said, you know what? I had this opportunity to speak last May. And then I said, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I don't even care anymore. And I did it. And then everything started changing. It started lightening up. And it's been an unbelievably healing moment for me. And I still don't necessarily enjoy talking about it. But I made the decision with myself. And I said, you know what? I'm so fortunate to be here. And there are so many people that aren't, that pass away from food allergies. And I walked out of there when I should have been dead or I should have been permanently brain damaged. I was oxygen starved. And there was a woman a few months after my incident that had that happen, and she's in a vegetative state. And I always had that like up there. So I read those articles, I see him, girl dies on an airplane, kid bites a Snickers bar on a playground, he's dead 20 minutes later. That was me, but for grace of the universe, I'm here now and healthy. And I said, you know what? My service back for that is going to be to speak about my experience and my integration and healing and the path I'm walking now. And I can bring healing, peace, comfort, or understanding to just one person. Anytime I do an interview, I speak, I talk to anybody, it's worth it to me. And I'm going to put my own self aside and do it. Because I don't need to talk about this. I don't have a burning desire, but I force myself to say, you know what, anyone that calls or texts or asks, or I put myself out there, I'm going to do it. And I found that to be very rewarding. And that's my repayment for being back alive is helping others.
So, Chris, do you think your NDE was planned or was it an accident? How do you feel about that?
That's a good question. I've thought about that. It's like, is there free will or predetermination? I don't know. I don't know. I don't think it really matters at this point. I mean, I put the end in my mouth. I'm here now.
Yeah.
I think life is a combination of both. And I don't know how my life would be different, or it could have gone anyway. I don't know that answer. I'm sure it could be a combination of both.
Well, the message you got from your grandparents or your grandfathers, it wasn't your time. I mean, so it sounds like because some people say they were given a choice. I've heard most people say they weren't. They were
there wasn't really a choice. And once I heard that, I remember fighting to go back. And that was it. I fought like, and that's it. That's interesting. When you're fighting to breathe, that's a very primal, like there's nothing more primal and natural in this universe when you're fighting to breathe for oxygen. So when someone's like, when you really want something like, when you've been to that level of, I'm fighting to breathe, that is, there's nothing beyond that. I was on that edge and went over it a bit. So I found my healing and my integration has significantly been accelerated, and I've come to more peace with this, being open and speaking about it. And I find it very rewarding to speak to others about it. And, every time I talk about my story, it's never a canned story. It just kind of comes out and flows out. And everyone I've ever spoken to in groups, or, I will do an interview, and then I'm very easy to find on the internet with my email and cell phone. So I get random, probably like since probably the last 5 months, I get at least 1 or 2 people randomly calling, texting, or emailing me that's saying, hey, I saw an interview or your video and I just Googled you and I got your cell number. So I get all these random calls, and it's from all over the world. And it's been this really beautiful experience with someone saying, hey, I lost a child, I lost, a spouse, I had this happen. There's no one I can talk to, but I saw your video and you said something that resonated with me. And I was like, and I just say, sure, I'm here to listen. And that was it. That was my repayment plan for giving an opportunity to live and be healthy and come back really fine, and in many ways 1,000 times better than I was. That's how I looked at it. It's like, all right, that's my job. I have to do this now. I've had 6.5 years to not talk about it. Now I'm going to talk about it and be of service to others. And that's my give back now. And
so let me ask you, what's your connection now? You mentioned earlier that your grandfathers are your primary spirit guides. What's your connection to the other side now? Do you have mediumistic abilities? Do you angels,
that's
your grandfathers?
I've always been fairly intuitive my whole life. I could always say now I'm very, very intuitive. I have very good mediumship ability, very good psychic ability. I don't read really for other people. I do it sometimes for my family. I do it a lot for myself. And I use it as my guiding way to make decisions in life or business or anything along like that. But I can use mediumship. I use psychic ability. I can pick up energy exceptionally well with someone, like meeting them and just kind of knowing. And it's been interesting because I've done some work with it more over the last few years with actually working with coaches and trainers that are mediums and psychics and really developing it one-on-one. And it's been really great. It's a tool. It's interesting. I I don't really talk about it outside of the NDE world. No one really knows I have that ability or that sense, because sometimes, you have to know your audience with this. And it's a very heavy topic, NDEs and spirituality and consciousness and death and dying. And then you bring in mediumship, spirits, angels. Listen, there's a community that loves that and you can let it go. And there's other people that not so much. And I'm very respectful of everyone. Yeah. And I go from there, but I do. And, it's interesting. All my grandparents have been deceased, but I don't feel that. There are moments where I'll think like, oh, so-and-so's still alive. And it's like, oh, wait, they passed away 8-9 years ago. And it's really odd because physically they're not here, but like being able to kind of tap into it and feel it, or I can see signs or little things here or there where like it's still energetically around. So there's the blessing of having that, or even in business or life where I can meet someone and I can kind of know what they're thinking, or I can see through. I would say, I can kind of see through most people instantly of what it is, what's going on, what's really happening, and all of that. And it's great. The downside is I have to be very, very cautious and aware of energy, my surroundings. I mean, salt baths, grounding. I mean, I have crystals and bracelets on right now and beads to go through this interview and grounding myself. So it's been a challenge in being, hypersensitive. And that takes a long time to develop, personal boundaries and grounding and energy and all of this. It's really a double-edged sword when you're new to it. And eventually anyone that does any of that energy work or spirits and meetings, they understand how best that they can navigate, because it can be very challenging to walk in or be like, I got to get out of here, or you pick up on something. And, there are countless times I've said to someone, I said, I'll call them. I'll be like, you got to get away from this person. It's not good. There's nothing. It's no. And then, 6 months later, I'm proven 100% right. It's just a challenge too, because you're hypersensitive to everything around you, from how well you sleep to, okay, I slept weird on my shoulder and my shoulder then explodes for a week, where, I'm just hypersensitive with everything, or food. Obviously for me is a major point. Food, weather, climate, the moment a storm comes in, I feel that in my body. So it's great when you can harness it properly, but it takes, there's a little bit of a bumpy road integrating those skill sets and the sensitivity.
Yeah, well, I can understand what you're saying. I mean, this world, I've talked to people like yourself that have this sensitivity to different energies and stuff that we might not, us normal people, kind of filter out. But for you, I guess, have to kind of learn to protect yourself. I wanted to ask you. I mean, you're obviously you're embracing life. You're happy to be back, to have your second chance and all that. What's your relationship with death like now? Now you're still a young man. You probably have a long time to go before you see your grandfathers again. But what are your thoughts on death?
This is an interesting question. I have no fear of death. I think it's as natural as being born. I think it's the most euphoric and peaceful experience for anyone that is facing that at the moment. It's not something to be feared. It's a natural progression. It's inevitable. And I want to add this to that question. I've spoken to people and I've met other people that want to die, and they want to, and even other NDEers that say, I really don't want to be back. I'm just waiting to go. And I don't judge anybody, but what I feel is life is so precious, and there's so much beauty in this world if you want to find it and see it. And there is chaos, but there's also beauty. It's a balance, everything in the universe. You can choose what you want to see and focus on. And I feel just living with gratitude and understanding the beauty and the preciousness of life, because you can't go back. It's final. In the sense that, like, hey, it's over. This life's over. It's over. There may be another one, but this one's over. And there are going to be people that miss you, and there's going to be moments, and there's so much you don't know, or things that can happen, or that we can do as individuals that can make life so rewarding and rewarding for others. So I look at life as my message, if I had to sum that up to someone that asked, I would say you want to live life every day with gratitude and look at it as a blessing. Because there's so much opportunity out there, and there's so much beauty, and we tend to overlook that. And as humans, we look at the bad, we look at the negative, we look at the moment and not the whole arc. I mean, if I was in there in that moment and I was laying there the day after my NDE and said, this is awful, this is painful, I just want to die because I can't figure out how my mind's working or anything, I would have missed out on the rest of my life, which is another 70 years, 80 years. So
yeah,
I feel we get too caught up in the moment, and we don't look at the big picture and say, there's going to be some rainy days. It happens to everyone. There's going to be some bad moments, bad this, bad relationships, bad whatever. But you know what? If we look at everything, you got to go through this storm. Guess what? It's going to be beautiful and amazing, and it's there if you want it. And I fall on the side of, you got to live life, and it's a gift. And when you're not looking at it as a gift, that shows you're not in gratitude, in my opinion, and you're not embracing and you're not evolving and you're not serving or helping or sharing. And that's really what I find so beautiful. And
yeah, I think that's really, really well put. It's what we choose to focus on. As you said, life is good. There's good and bad, and every bad thing, there's some good that comes out of it. So we have to look at the entire arc, and I think another thing you said I think was really excellent. If you believe in reincarnation, that's great, but you're never going to have this life again. This life is unique, and it's not very long.
Yeah.
So, Chris, I understand you're speaking at the IANS conference. There's going to be a virtual IANS conference. All of our listeners know it's going to be online August 14th through 16th. And IANS is the International Association for Near-Death Studies. And if people want to know about it, that's at virtualconference.ians.org. So virtualconference.iands.org. And you're going to be speaking.
I'm on a panel. This is my second time speaking. This is my third time. Well, this will be my fourth time attending, which is an amazing conference. It's been life-changing for me to meet other experiencers and people and researchers. It's my favorite 4 days out of the year. And I'm so disappointed we're not in person this year, but I'll take the virtual conference. Amazing experience, amazing people. Second time speaking, fourth time visiting. We are going to be discussing integrating near-death experiences after having experience. Because, like we said earlier, the experience is like 2% of the pie. The other 98 is, integrating it, evolving, understanding, sharing, growing, and living your life in the best possible way of taking that. And really, you have an NDE and a circle back. It's what you do after. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to make yourself better? Are you going to be with community and people? Are you going to share? Are you going to grow? Are you going to be a better human being? What are you going to do? And I think that's a big question that you want to ask yourself. I found for me that, having that purpose or understanding, and at least saying, again, this is not something it's not easy for me to talk about. A year and a half ago, this would have never happened. Even a year ago, it still would have been, maybe. Saying, all right, I'm going to do this and I'm going to share and I'm going to put myself out there and, evolving along. And, so that a lot of the panel we're going to be discussing is that, and some advice and our personal stories and experiences and how to continue that journey. Because, I'll be saying something different a year, 2 years, 5 years from now. It's always evolving. And being aware that it's never going to remain the same, and it's always going to change, and being open to that. And I think, when people say they want an NDE, there are other ways to find that enlightenment or understand. I think really what people want is a way to find healing and peace and substance in their lives, and to go through something that's difficult, whether it be grief or change or transformation. That's it. No one wants the pain. They just want the after effect. And if someone can discuss it and say, hey, listen, I went through it. You don't have to suffocate to death. Let me save you that. And this is what I've realized, and this is what I felt. And, take it, leave it, take what you like, don't like, or what may resonate or might seem authentic to you, and work with that. And if that could bring healing, peace, transformation, or harmony, take it and run. Because I think that's what everyone wants ultimately in the end. It's just someone needs to find something. They think the NDE is the quick shot. It's not. It's painful, violent, intense, and then you still got to do decades of work afterwards. And anyone that says they don't, my own experience, it's going to continue forever.
Yeah, I think what you just said was wonderful. I think it's excellent, and I applaud you for what you're doing, because I think it's very, very important. I attend our local IANS meetings here in Cincinnati, and I've gotten to meet a lot of people that have had NDEs. And as I said, from the outside, it seems like it's a euphoric thing. You get to go across the other side, you get to see loved ones and stuff, but people don't realize all the work that's involved, when you come back from it. And I've seen people in that community struggle to integrate it. And for people like you that have been through it and gone through your 6 years, it's like I work with grief. I work with people who mostly have children transition. So they can look at me and say, well, I can get to where, Brian is. Hopefully I can be an example for them. You're an example for someone who just had an NDE that might be going, what just happened to me? I can't deal with this world anymore. So I applaud you for what you're doing. Well, Chris, it's been really great getting to know you. I appreciate you being yourself and putting it out there and doing the work that you're doing in the world. I look forward to seeing you.
We'll do another Zoom in a couple of weeks. Maybe next year we'll meet up in person in DC or so.
That'd be nice. All right. It's good.
Thank you, Brian.
Have a good day.
Take care.
Bye. Well, I hope you enjoyed the episode. I want to make it really easy for you to reach me. So just send me a text to 31996 and simply text the word growth, GROWTH. In fact, you can right now just say, hey Siri, send a message to 31996. And when Siri asks you what you want to send, just say growth. You can do the same thing with OK Google. Thanks a lot. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks for listening to Grief to Growth. Brian hopes that you find this episode helpful and will come back for future episodes. Brian's best-selling book, Grief to Growth, Planted Not Buried, is a great resource for anyone who is coping with grief or knows someone who is. If you enjoy the podcast and would like to support it, there are 3 things you can do to help. The first is to share the podcast with someone that you think it will help. The second is to go to iTunes, rate, and review the episode. The third way you can support the podcast is by becoming a patron. Head over to www.patreon.com/grief2growth. That's patreon.com/grief, the number 2, growth, and sign up to make a small monthly donation. Patrons get access to exclusive bonus content and knowledge that you are helping to spread the message of grief to growth. For more about Brian and Grief to Growth, visit www.grief2growth.com.
Hi there. I hope you enjoyed this latest episode of the podcast, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. What questions came up for you? What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? I invite you to visit us at grief2growth.circle.so. That's grief, the number 2, growth.circle.so to continue the conversation with me and with other listeners. It's a space to sound off, to share reactions, and to go deeper into the topics from the show. I look forward to chatting more, and I hope to see you there.